I wanted to remind everybody as we get started here about the format of these town halls. These are very similar to radio call-in shows where you can call and ask questions of me and then I can answer. So at any time during the call, if you would like to ask a question, press *3 on your telephone. You can do that anytime starting now, *3, and one of the members of my staff will take down your information and put you in the queue for the Q&A. So that's *3. Also, just as a reminder, the best way of staying in touch with my office and staying in touch with what we're doing in Washington, D.C. on your behalf is to subscribe to our newsletter. And you can do that at any time during the call by pressing *6. So again, to ask a question at any time starting now, press *3. And if you would like to subscribe to our newsletter, press *6. So the format of the call is I'll give you just for a few minutes here an update on the goings on in Washington, D.C., what we're voting on currently, what's top of mind for me and for the Congress. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So I'd like to start tonight with some discussion about the situation in Ukraine, which obviously is very dire. It's something that I've been following closely. It's something that I am extremely concerned about. The actions of Russia towards its neighbor Ukraine have been completely unconscionable. They have violated the territorial integrity of a sovereign nation whose democracy has been selected by the people of Ukraine. So this is a very territorially aggressive act. Unfortunately, harkens back to the era of the bad old days when nation states would go to war with each other over territory. I think we were all hopeful that maybe those days had passed, and unfortunately, Russia and Vladimir Putin are proving us wrong on that. So it's a very concerning situation, particularly concerning for me because we know that China is watching this situation very closely. And China, of course, has expressed in no uncertain terms its aggression towards the independent island of Taiwan. And I'm afraid that President Xi in China is going to get the impression, based on Vladimir Putin taking over Ukraine, that maybe it's okay for China to have those same ambitions towards Taiwan. And Taiwan is a very important strategic and economic partner to the United States. I don't think that we could sit idly by while China. So, unfortunately, that could be the catalyst that involves the world in another war, which is something none of us want. So, I am fully supportive of many of the actions that the administration has taken in imposing severe economic sanctions against Russia in response to its aggression towards Ukraine. In fact, I wish that the administration had acted more quickly. Those of you who know me and have followed me on my newsletter know how upset I was about the administration's handling of the pullout from Afghanistan last year. And unfortunately, I feel that the weakness that we showed the international community in our pullout from Afghanistan directly led to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It incentivized Vladimir Putin in his belief that this is something the international community would allow. And so, unfortunately, I think that the U.S. was complicit in that. Many of us have been calling for strong economic sanctions against Ukraine. Fortunately, we are in a different era than we were in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, where the economic might of the United States and its allies is actually a more powerful deterrent than its military might towards aggressive actions by bad actors in the international community, such as Russia. So I wish that we had acted a little more quickly. I was one that a week ago was calling for the closure of United States airspace to Russian aircraft in following the direction of some of our allies like Canada and the European Union. Fortunately, several days ago, President Biden took that step, for which I am very thankful. And just yesterday, the president announced something that I have been pushing for the last week, which is to impose economic sanctions against Russian energy. As many people know, Russia's biggest exports are oil and natural gas, and that's where Russia generates the majority of its foreign currency reserves. So we really can't implement effective economic sanctions against Russia without also sanctioning the use of that energy. One thing, however, that the administration has not done, unfortunately, is restore its opposition to domestic energy production. Most people know that the day that the Biden administration took power, they canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, which was an energy pipeline from Canada down into the U.S. What a lot of people don't know is that that pipeline would be carrying by now more oil than we import entirely from Russia. So the reason why I'm so convicted that the Biden administration needs to start permitting U.S. oil exploration again and natural gas exploration is that I want to avoid these sanctions against Russia from affecting Americans in the form of higher energy costs and higher fuel prices. Many times those fuel prices are paid by people who can least afford to pay them, the least fortunate members of our community, people who are struggling to just get to work and back every day to put food on the table for their families. We want to make sure that they aren't bearing the cost of these sanctions. And the only way to do that is to restore the United States to energy independence so that we're not reliant on foreign countries like Russia to supply our energy needs. And I think that the situation in Russia and Ukraine have demonstrated how important that is to our national security. So we're going to continue to push for that. We're voting tonight on making official the sanctions on Russian energy, but I'm one of those that is really pleading with the Biden administration to resume issuing permits for oil and gas exploration on public lands in the United States, because only by restoring our energy independence are we going to avoid having those costs borne by American citizens. Just to remind you, we're going to get to the Q&A section of our town hall in just a couple of minutes. If you have a question for me, something I've talked about or something I haven't talked about, please press *3. You can do that at any time, including right now. Press *3 on your phone. One of my staff members will take your information and we'll put you in the queue. And again, the best way of keeping in touch with what I'm doing for you in Washington is to subscribe to my newsletter, and you can do that at any time by pressing *6. So we'd like to keep these town halls interactive. So we're going to have our first poll of the town hall right now. And that's related to the topic that we've been discussing about Ukraine and the Russian invasion. So here's the question. Do you think that the United States has done enough to respond to Russia's invasion of Ukraine? So press 1 right now on your phone if you think that yes, press 2 for no, and press 3 for other or unsure. So the question, do you think the United States has done enough to respond to Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for other or unsure. And we'll have the results of that poll in our very next newsletter in the next couple of days. So I'd like to kind of transition from talking about what we've been discussing about higher energy prices to talking about what's been going on with inflation in the United States. And those of you who tuned into my last town hall know how concerned I am about the resurgence of inflation. Unfortunately, the current round of inflation in the U.S. was completely foreseeable. For the last 18 months, economists have been warning us that the deficit spending that the federal government was engaging in was dangerously inflationary, because what you have when in the last 18 months, the federal government has dumped an extra $4 trillion of federal spending into the economy. And what we've created is a situation where you have too many dollars chasing a fixed number of goods and services. And macroeconomically, that has to lead to inflation because prices have to rise to compensate for that imbalance in supply and demand. Unfortunately, that is exactly what we've seen. Inflation has been rising and prices have been rising for the last 9 months. And when we got the numbers for January, they were truly alarming. Inflation is running at an annualized rate of 7.5%, which is the highest it's been in 40 years. And for those of you who subscribe to follow me on social media, I posted a picture of me when inflation was this high. It was 40 years ago, and I had a mullet. I'm embarrassed to say, but it was very in vogue at the time. But that just illustrates how long ago it was that inflation was this bad. And unfortunately, I fear it's going to get worse before it gets better. I hope I'm wrong, but I fear I'm not. We're going to get new inflation in the next couple of days, the inflation numbers from the month of February, and we'll see what's happening there. But an even more important number is real wage growth, which measures whether or not wages are keeping up with inflation. And the wage growth numbers for January were equally alarming. It shows that wages on a year to year basis have fallen 2.4%. So although wages have increased, they've only increased about 5%, which isn't enough to keep up with 7.5% inflation. So that means that the average American is falling further and further behind as these prices escalate. Uh, and the only way out of this for the United States is to undo the disastrous economic policies that got us into this mess in the first place, which means stopping this excess federal deficit spending and getting us more towards a balanced budget. I've talked about this before. Those of you who know me well know how passionate I am about this issue, but it's something that I'm going to continue pushing for here in Congress. It's a particularly topical issue for us tonight because tonight, later this evening, we're 3 hours ahead. Obviously, it's a little after 8 p.m. here. I would imagine just around about midnight, we will be voting in Washington on an omnibus spending bill. And just to show you how messed up things are in the United States right now, you should know that we have been operating without a budget for this entire fiscal year, which started on on September the 1st last year. So we're almost halfway through our fiscal year. We still don't have a budget. And not only do we not have a budget, but Congress has not officially authorized any of the federal spending that's going on. We've passed what are called continuing resolutions, which just take the numbers from last year and continue them into this year to avoid a government shutdown. So we're finally getting around to authorizing spending, still without a budget. No budget, but finally getting around halfway into our year of authorizing spending for this year. And we call that the Omnibus spending bill. I am disgusted at the process that's been followed. And I don't think anyone, regardless of your politics, regardless of what party you belong to or what policies you follow, I don't think anyone could defend the way that this has been handled in Congress. So this omnibus spending bill was put into print at 1:30 a.m. this morning. This morning, 1:30 a.m., we saw it for the first time. It's nearly 3,000 pages long, and we will be voting on it less than 24 hours after it was introduced. So you know that I'm one who believes in reading all of the bills. There is no way anyone could have read through this bill and understand what's in it. It's just humanly impossible to do. I think this process is incredibly disrespectful, not only to the members of Congress, but also to the general public who expect us to cast informed votes on this. And for that reason alone, I would be a no on most of the spending. But in addition, the spending bill increases federal spending substantially over last year's levels, which unfortunately just puts us more towards increasing the deficit and makes that budget harder to balance in the future, increases our national debt, and makes it harder to pay down. So I will be voting no on the omnibus, with the exception of the section that deals with the narrow subject of defense spending and military aid for the Ukraine. We just talked about that. You know how strongly I feel that the U.S. needs to support Ukraine in its conflict with Russia and push back on that territorial aggression. So I will be voting yes on that section of spending, but everything else definitely be a no for those reasons. So having said that, let's do our second poll here. And the poll is on inflation. So here's the question. The question is, how concerned are you that rising inflation will affect your family's finances? Press 1 if you're very concerned. Press 2 if somewhat concerned. Press 3 if you're not concerned. Press 4 for other or unsure. So the question, how concerned are you that rising inflation will affect your family's finances? Press 1 now if you are very concerned. Press 2 if you are somewhat concerned. Press 3 if you're not concerned. Press 4 if it's other or unsure. And again, we will have the results of that poll in our next issue of our newsletter, which will be in the next couple of days. And again, just a reminder, we're getting close to our Q&A section here. If you have a question for me about anything that I've talked about on the call or anything else that you'd like to discuss, you can press *3 at any time, including right now, and one of my staff members will take down your information. *3 for that. Or if you'd like to subscribe to our newsletter, you can press *6 at any time, including right now. So lastly, I want to talk about some of the legislation that I have introduced and am championing this year in the House of Representatives. And one in particular is very much on my heart right now. That's H.R. 6434. And if you remember your history, you'll remember that just a couple of weeks ago, we celebrated a very unfortunate milestone in the United States. It was the 80th anniversary of when FDR signed the executive order that required the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. And just to set the stage, I mean, these were people that had been here in some cases for generations. It was just their ethnicity that was distrusted. Many of them had children that were serving overseas in the military, risking their lives for America, and yet they were rounded up. Their property was confiscated. They were sent to internment camps where they were forced to live in sometimes very deplorable conditions for the remainder of the war. In retrospect, we recognize that this was one of the darkest periods in American history. But the only, if history teaches us anything, it teaches that the power of the lessons of history is to avoid repeating those same mistakes in the future. And that's why I've introduced this bill. This bill will create a historic network within the national park system that links all of these internment sites together. The reason why this is so important to me is that one of the internment sites, in fact, the best preserved internment site, is in our district. It's up in Manzanar, which is in Inyo County. And if you have not been up there to see it, I really highly encourage you to go. The National Park Service has done a great job with not only preserving that site, but creating kind of an interpretive history lesson as you walk through. You will really get an idea of how these unfortunate Japanese Americans were forced to live. And if you've been to Manzanar before, you know it is a beautiful site, but it is incredibly remote. And it is in a very harsh climate. It gets very hot in the summer, very cold in the winter. I can't imagine what it was like to live there away from your family and your business for year after year. My bill will create a historic network that will mirror similar networks that were created for things like the Civil Rights Movement and the Underground Railroad, to link all these sites together, raise public awareness of this, because only in talking about this as Americans do we guarantee that something like this will never happen again. So I'm very happy that we've got broad bipartisan support on this bill. It got a hearing several weeks ago in the Full Natural Resources Committee. It was passed out of the committee unanimously. I'm very happy to say it's now pending a vote in the House of Representatives, and I am cautiously optimistic that within the next several weeks we're going to get that vote and we're going to get it out of the House and over the Senate. And I'm also optimistic that with the support of some of my colleagues in the Senate, we'll be able to get this signed into law. So something that I'm very passionate about. So we have come to the start of our Q&A session, and I've left a lot of time here at the end for to answer any questions that you might have. Just as a fair warning here, we don't know when votes are coming here in the House tonight, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to finish a full 40 minutes of Q&A. It's possible that I could, in the last 10 minutes, be called away to vote. I'm sure you'll understand if that occurs, but hopefully we're going to be okay. So as a reminder, if you have a question for me, please press *3 at any time, including right now, and we will put you in the queue. And if you would like to subscribe to my newsletter, please press *6 at any time. All right, so let me look at the queue here. Richard from Hesperia, you are on, sir. What can I answer for you?
My appreciation to you, Congressman, for the work that you've done in Washington, D.C. We do realize that it's a change in administration, and with the changing of the guard, there comes perhaps new policies as well as new challenges. However, I'd like to commend your effort as well as your newsletter that definitely inform voters of the district of what's going on and perhaps make the information more district specific. We hear a lot of times that there are comments made on the evening broadcast news that doesn't necessarily affect persons in the district. And I think your newsletter does address that. So I commend you on that. Having said that, we're going through some challenges right now financially, as well as medically in in the country. One is, of course, gas prices. The president did cap the reserves that offered a minimum decrease for a short period of time. However, looking at the long-term aspect, I would like to get your thoughts on what do you propose and what do you think the new administration is going to propose going forward for the reduction in gas prices, perhaps increasing drilling, but that's just one aspect. And the most important thing I'm looking at this particular time is healthcare. I was watching the news and I saw a broadcast on all three major networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, with the Red Cross broadcasting that there's a nationwide blood crisis shortage. My synopsis on that is several reasons. One, people who normally donate may have contracted COVID, and if they haven't contracted COVID, then they're taking care of persons who have contracted COVID. And that may have taken some of the typical donors or normal donors out of the spend cycle who normally contribute. So what are your thoughts on perhaps alleviating that? That hasn't necessarily gotten full frontal attention, but the major networks did broadcast the issue, and I did participate in terms of donating, but I would like to energize the country as well as the districts a little bit more.
Sure.
Appreciate you taking my question.
That's absolutely great questions. Thank you, Richard. And to answer them in order, yes, the Biden administration has issued an executive order tapping part of the strategic oil reserve. Unfortunately, the amount of barrels of oil that will release is not enough to have a major impact on gas prices, and it will not. That the period of time it'll influence gas prices is not very long. We could tap a greater percentage of the strategic reserve, but unfortunately, we have to be cognizant of the fact that the reserve exists for a reason. In the case of a natural emergency, we'd need that fuel. So we can't let it go down too far, and it's at best a short-term solution. So as you say, the only long-term solution is to return America to energy independence. And that is something that's going to take some time to ramp up. But every day that goes by that we don't do that is a day before we're going to see the effects. And, this is one of the things that I really think that people would consider more, and I wish that the Biden administration would consider this more, is the fact that America produces energy more cleanly than any country in the world because of our stringent environmental regulations. And particularly Russia. Russia's oil production is very damaging for the climate. They flare their methane rather than capturing it and using it. And then you've got to transship that oil long distances, refine it, and then ship it into the United States. So you've got all of those emissions as well. So when we curtail domestic energy production, not only are we harming our national security, which we are, not only are we raising the price of energy for Americans, which we do, but we are also harming the climate because we are forcing that energy production offshore to countries where it is produced less cleanly. And of course, the atmosphere doesn't care where carbon dioxide is emitted. It harms the whole planet. It doesn't matter if it's emitted in Russia or the United States, it's equally harmful. So, everyone agrees we should be transitioning towards a green economy and green energy. No one is having that debate, but we're not there yet, and we're not going to get there within the next few years, even as hard as we're pushing. So the problem is on the path we're on, these energy prices are going to continue to increase, and they're harming Americans who can't afford to pay it. These are Americans that are clinging to the edge of poverty already, and this is just going to send them down that slippery slope. So, that's so to answer your question, yes, releasing some oil from the reserve helps a little. It's not a long-term solution to the problem. Only increasing domestic energy production can do that. And then to your question, your excellent question about the blood shortage, yes, it's a little more complicated than what you articulated. It's not that it's not that the blood use is up or that the facilities were closed. I think people during COVID were fearful of going into a medical setting where they might contract COVID and then bring it home unwittingly to their families. And so blood donations have been down substantially for the last 18 months, and that's why organizations like the American Red Cross are running short. So, I mean, obviously, we've got very effective vaccines now. COVID infection rates are lower than they've been since pretty much the start of the pandemic. So, if you feel led, I certainly would join Richard in encouraging you to go down and donate blood. So, thank you, Richard, for the excellent question. So, again, anyone that wants to ask a question, press *3 and we'll get you in the queue. *6 if you want to subscribe to our newsletter. All right, our next question is going to be from Davina in Hesperia. What can I answer for you?
Hi, Congressman. Thank you. My question was originally regarding the Omnibus bill, and you've already expressed what your vote would be. So I'm wondering if you can please explain how Congress can get away with introducing a bill literally in the middle of the night and expecting a vote to take place. And then I also would like to know, will you be voting for the continuing resolution? And then lastly, I learned, and I don't know if it's true, but I'm hoping you can decide, you personally pilot your own plane to and from DC.
Okay, do you have a question about that or?
No, I just was, I work with some folks who go to DC, and so that part was, I don't know, I was kind of caught off guard. I didn't expect that. You seem very down to earth, and I don't judge either way. I was just curious.
Yeah. Okay, well, sure, I'm happy to talk about that. Sure. Okay, so in order, let's see, the omnibus bill. The first question was about the CR, right? Mm-hmm. I'm saying yes. Okay. So the question is, will I be voting for the continuing resolution? And let me take a moment and explain what that means. So the government funding expires on Friday of this week, which means that absent some more authorization for federal spending, we will have a government shutdown starting on Friday. So that is something that I think would be very destructive. I'm not supportive of government shutdowns. We have had a series of what are called continuing resolutions that have funded the government from the start of our fiscal year, the beginning of September, until now. And I have voted for each of those, not only because I don't believe that government shutdowns are productive, but also because they continue the appropriations levels from the budget from last year. And I think if we're going to get towards a balanced budget, we do that by keeping our federal spending at current levels, and then allowing that to reduce the deficit and eventually reduce the national debt. So there's tonight, because the Senate probably will not have time to vote on the omnibus bill that the House is voting on this evening before the shutdown would start in later this week. We are also going to be considering a continuing resolution for just another few days. And yes, because I don't want the government to be shut down, I will be voting for that. So question about the fact that I'm a pilot. A lot of people don't know this, but that actually is how I got into public service in the first place. 18 years ago, I ran for a seat on the Big Bear Airport Board, which is a little airport in Big Bear where I live. And because it's governed as a California special district, if you want to serve on the board, you have to run in an election the same way you would in a school board or for a city council. And so that was my introduction to politics. I just wanted to do it out of a desire to serve the airport and the community. And much to my surprise, it was a good fit for me. So I served 5 years on that board, 3 terms as board president, and then ran for city council, and then ran for mayor, 2 terms as mayor, and then 3 terms in the legislature, and now my second year in Congress. But it all started with our airport, and I still fly. I fly. It's actually difficult to stay current when you're away from home as much as I am, but we do fly most of the time from Big Bear to Washington, D.C. and back when I can. So it's still something that I enjoy doing. It saves me time too. And then one question my staff is telling me that I skipped over, and I don't want to do that. It was, how can Congress justify this action of introducing bills in the middle of the night and then passing them? And I mean, I can't defend the practice. I think it's abhorrent. However, I will tell you that I think that the majority of the leadership here in Washington, D.C. has kind of forgotten what it's like to be a rank and file member that's interested in casting informed votes. They see everything through a political lens. And, in that kind of thinking, if they put it out and they tell people to vote for it, it should get enough votes to pass. And they're not thinking about the public perception. They're not thinking about the fact that anyone would know that it's impossible to read 3,000 pages of bill in less than 24 hours, and the whole country will know that everyone in Congress is casting an uninformed vote. But unfortunately, that's just the lens through which they see the world. And I think it's an indication of what's wrong with the House of Representatives and the Congress right now. But thank you very much for the questions. All right, we're going to go to Jesse from Victorville. Jesse, what can I answer for you?
Hello, yes. Thank you, Congressman, for this town hall. I have during your opening statements, you talked about inflation. Inflation tends to rise and fall with time. I remember in 1984, I bought a house, and my interest rate was 18%. 18 months later, I refinanced. It was 6%. Another year and a half went by. I refinanced. It was 5%. So inflation tends to ebb and flow, but salaries tend to stay stagnant. And I believe that's because corporations now, they care less about their employees than they care about their stockholders. So consequently, as inflation rises, they do not increase salaries at the same rate that inflation did. Whereas in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, they did. And so consequently, it affects us harder now than it did at that time. So it's sort of a cyclical thing, and I think there's not too much you can really do about it. I don't believe. I don't know. What is your thoughts on that, Congressman?
Well, it's a great question. So I agree with you that inflation ebbs and flows, but I disagree with you that it's just something that happens that doesn't happen for a reason. Economists will tell you that the world economy is, this complex interlocking system, and there are usually reasons for anything that happens on a macroeconomic scale. So there were good reasons why we had surging inflation in the 1970s. There were good reasons why interest rates in the early 80s surged as a result of that. And there are reasons why both of them subsided, in the late 1980s. And unfortunately, there are good reasons why the inflation is surging again now. And they are directly caused by not only the supply chain disruption, but also, and more importantly, the role that the government had to play in that disruption, and the role that the government had to play in dumping trillions of dollars of excess spending into the economy. So I disagree that it's something that we can't do anything about, because what we can do is to stop doing the things that are catalyzing inflation. I think you had some really poignant remarks on the fact that wages have not kept up with inflation, and that's one of the things that I am very concerned about. I do not agree, though, however, with your characterization that most companies don't care about their employees. I mean, I can tell you, I've been in business for over 30 years. My employees are like my family. And there have been times when I had to borrow money to meet payroll in my business. And I was willing to do that because the needs of my employees were more important to me than the needs of my shareholders, which were myself and my family. So, and I think that a lot of U.S. companies are in that same position. But unfortunately, they all compete in a global economy. And you might say, well, what if you're not willing to, if you want to raise wages, just raise your prices. But because companies compete in a global economy, sometimes it's not possible to raise their prices. So, I mean, if you're manufacturing a commodity and you're shipping it overseas, when you price that commodity more expensively than someone overseas can get it from another source, you're just going to lose that business. They're going to go get it from somewhere else. And these companies are expert at this. They've been doing it, for competing in a global economy for a long time. And so sometimes their ability to just raise their prices so that they can raise wages is constrained. So, but I don't think it's because they don't want to. And I don't think it's because of, this a prioritization of investor return. Yeah, thanks very much for that question. It was really insightful. Again, if you have a question, please press *3 at any time, and we'll get you in the queue here. And to subscribe to our newsletter, please press *6. So let's go back to questions. Ben from Hesperia. Ben, what can I answer for you?
Oh, hi. Thank you very much for taking my question. I was just wondering what the focus is on oil for achieving energy independence, because my opinion is that burning fossil fuels is basically burning our children's future. And instead, supporting nuclear and other renewables. And you did mention that you acknowledge that renewables is the way to go, but I don't know exactly what policies you have started or backed that are pushing for renewables.
Right. That's a great question. And I'm so glad that you brought up nuclear. Nuclear, I mean, I think is the cleanest energy that mankind knows how to produce, acknowledging that there's nothing that man does that is without environmental consequence. And so nuclear, has some known problems, particularly the problem that it produces nuclear waste that, that's dangerously radioactive for thousands of years, and that something has to be done with. But that for from an environmental standpoint, that is preferable to dumping millions of metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere to create energy. So I think it's very unfortunate that we as a society have turned away from nuclear. There are countries that have persisted in getting nuclear as part of their energy grid. Countries like France that are now reaping the benefits of that. Here in California, we're preparing to shut down our very last nuclear plant. That's the one in Diablo Canyon. I've actually been there and toured there, and we're preparing to shut it down, which is going to have a really unfortunate consequence because right now 10% of our grid energy in California comes from Diablo Canyon. So the nuclear has gotten a bad rap because of some highly publicized accidents. But what people don't realize is that the reason why nuclear has these dangerous failure modes is it's based on the chemistry of uranium, which the reason why we based our nuclear technology originally around uranium is because we understood how it worked, because we used it to build bombs. So, it's good at blowing things up. We can't be surprised when sometimes reactors blow up. But we've got now next generation nuclear technologies that exist around other elements like iodine and sodium that don't require active cooling. So you'd never get like a Fukushima where active cooling failed and you had a meltdown. They're just, the failure modes are much more benign. Also, we're talking about fission energy. Fusion energy is coming. That's something that's been on the horizon for a long time, but people should know that we had a breakthrough on fusion energy just a few months ago in a U.S. national laboratory in August. We achieved for the first time in human history fusion ignition. And just in November, as the math was being done on that reaction, we realized that not only had we achieved ignition, we achieved what's called break even, which means that we got more energy back from the fusion reaction than we did put in the energy we put in to the fuel pellet. So fusion energy probably in the the period of maybe 10 to 20 years is going to become commercially viable. It produces, it's not waste free, but it's a much lower grade of waste and less tonnage of waste than fission energy. And so that's really going to help us. But I think we really need to answer your other question about renewables. We need to take an all of the above approach to green energy. I don't think that one technology alone is going to allow us to win the war on climate change. I think it's got to be a combination of, yes, absolutely nuclear, but also solar, also wind, also hydroelectric, which it's crazy that California still doesn't recognize hydroelectric as green energy, but don't even get me started on that. Anyway, you can tell this is something I'm very passionate about. I sat on the California Committee for Utilities and Energy for years, and I currently sit on the Committee for Science, Space, and Technology, and we're the ones that oversee the Department of Energy's research budget as well as NASA and our national labs. And that's why this is something I'm deeply involved in and very passionate about. But thank you very much for the question. That was a great one. All right, let's go to Yvonne from Victorville. Yvonne, what can I answer for you?
Good evening, Councilman. We have a lot of homeless here in Victorville. I mean, they're even laying on the street. And I want to know why we can't do something at George Air Force Base to house these people, have maybe those that are veterans, have the VA come in to help them to get the counseling they need. And also, I want to find out what's happening with the Ukrainian refugees that will be coming here. Have they been tested? Will they be tested for COVID? Have they been vaccinated?
Oh, great questions. So homelessness is an incredibly serious problem in Victorville and in the entire state of California. And, here's the tragedy of the problem of homelessness. You would think we all live on this kind of political spectrum where some of us believe in small government, lower taxes, but fewer government services. Some believe in bigger government, which means higher taxes and more government services. In California, we're obviously on the big government side of the spectrum as a state government, right? We have the highest income tax of any state. We have the highest sales tax of any state. We have the highest gas tax of every state. We should have the best of everything that government has to offer, particularly our social safety net to deal with problems like homelessness. And unfortunately, most people are shocked to find out we have the worst homelessness of any state in the country, the worst. We have the worst poverty of any state in the country. There is no excuse for that. It's pretty clear that the reason why we have failed to solve the problem of homelessness does not have to do with the amount of money that we're spending on it. It has to do with the approach that we're taking. And when you look at homelessness, you realize that it's actually a very complex problem. If it was as simple as people are homeless because they don't have homes, the problem would have been solved long ago. But it's a complex mixture of mental illness. There's a lot of that. That's tied directly back into when the state mental hospitals were closed in California. These people had nowhere to go. I was in Tokyo a couple of years ago with a delegation, and I asked our tour guide. I didn't see any homeless in Tokyo, and I asked our tour guide, why am I not seeing any homeless? And she said, "Oh, we have homelessness." And I said, "Well, I haven't seen any." She said, "No, I saw one. I saw someone that was homeless last month." And I had to explain to her, no. In California, we have homeless cities. We have tent cities of people that are homeless. And she was aghast. She said, "How could you possibly allow that to happen?" And I explained about mental illness and substance abuse, and she got very cross with me. And she said, "Here in Japan, if there's somebody who's mentally ill, we take them and we get them treated. How could you possibly let these people live in squalor on the street and not treat their underlying mental health condition?" And there was nothing I could say to her because we are completely failing as a society to do that. So, Governor Newsom, he certainly has his faults, and we don't agree on a lot of different things, but he has been talking about reviving this idea of a mental health conservancy that we can use to get these people the treatment that they need. I actually think that that's a really good idea if we can do it correctly, because that's going to solve part of the problem. And also, substance abuse, we need to recognize that that is one of the root causes of homelessness. And you're never going to solve the homeless problem without solving the substance abuse problem. And then you had a great question about Ukrainian refugees. We are just in the early stages of planning for that. We know that there's already, we've had well over 1 million refugees flee from Ukraine already. It is already the largest displacement of refugees since World War II, just to give you an idea of the size of that. So the government is still putting into place programs for where those refugees are going to go and where they're going to end up. I don't have the details of that right now, but we'll be sure and share that as that situation develops. But thank you for the great questions. Those were wonderful. Let's see. Looks like Dina from Hesperia. Dina, what can I answer for you?
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank you for voting no on the Omnibus thing. And then also, I know you kind of touched on the Keystone Pipeline, but I want to know if you guys are fighting in D.C. to open that back up. Because I feel like it's fine and dandy to not import the oil from Russia, but who's it hurting? It's hurting all of us here. We can't afford gas now. And also, what can you do, or what do you say about Newsom just fighting for all electric vehicles in California when Southern California Edison shuts down our electricity if you live in high wind areas, so we won't even be able to charge our cars.
Right.
That's basically my question.
Great questions. Great questions. So the first one about Keystone. I completely agree that the Keystone Pipeline is one of the measures we should be restarting. In fact, just last week, I co-sponsored a bill that would require the executive branch to immediately restart permitting for the Keystone XL pipeline. I think I mentioned in my comments earlier that just that pipeline alone would supply more oil to the United States than we are currently importing from Russia. And it would come from a country that, first of all, has much more clean oil production technologies in place, and second of all, is much more friendly to the United States. So, that's something that we're actively working on. I mean, unfortunately, with the current political climate in D.C., I can't say with any kind of optimism that bill is going to pass this session of Congress, but I think it's a useful thing for us to be talking about, and we're certainly going to be fighting for that. And then, oh my goodness, I've already forgotten the second question. What was it? Electric vehicles. Oh, excellent point. I mean, I'm a fan of electric vehicles, but here is the problem with what Gavin Newsom is proposing to do in requiring everyone to transition to electric vehicles by, I think the sunset year is 2030. The problem is that there are a lot of Californians who just struggle to make ends meet every day. And the current generation of electric vehicles, even with purchase subsidies, are more expensive to buy and to run than fossil fuel powered vehicles. So if you force people to use electric vehicles, you are going to raise the amount of money that they have to spend to live, and you're going to lower their quality of life. And if you want proof of that, I mean, where I live in Big Bear Lake, residential electricity right now costs 36 cents a kilowatt hour. 36 cents a kilowatt hour. To give you an idea, the average cost of electricity in California, not only is it substantially lower than that, but it's still twice as high for residential as the average in Nevada or Arizona. Twice as high. Commercial electricity were 3 times as high. Industrial electricity were 4 times as high. And that's a direct result of the regulations that the state has put on the generation of power here. So, the consequence of that is electric vehicles cost more to run than fossil fuel vehicles. And that's with gas. I have to do the math again. I don't know what's $7 a gallon gas. We'll see if that's still the case. But it illustrates just how burdensome that is on some of the people I represent. And I talk to a lot of people who commute from the high desert over the Cajon Pass into LA and back every day to feed their families. A lot of people, thousands and thousands of people in that category. Those are my constituents, and they have told me that they do this not because they want to. They don't want to spend 3 hours a day in the car. They have to do that for their jobs, and they can't afford to be forced to buy a car that's costs more to run than the car that they already have. So that's why I'm so opposed to mandates for electric vehicles. It's not that I oppose the transition to electric. It's not that I don't like electric vehicles. I'm just very cognizant of the impact that that's going to have on the people that I represent that are already struggling. But that was a great question. Let's see. Looks like Presley from Barstow. What can I answer for you?
Yes, Congressman. The oil companies are making large profits. Is there any way that the profit margin that they're making off of this is publicized so the American people will know how much profit they're stealing? And also, the state of California, the more profit that the oil companies make, the more profit and taxes that the state's gathering. So is the state doing anything to relieve the burden of the local populace as far as the taxes? We have one of the highest taxes on gas as it is in the country now.
Right. No, great questions. So anyone who's interested in profit margins for energy companies, particularly oil companies, fortunately, those are publicly traded corporations, and therefore they issue annual reports, and you can get them online. You can go online and see exactly what their profit margins are. What you will find, however, is that although they are profitable, the profit margins that they make really are not out of line with the amount of revenue that what they call turnover that they get. It's kind of an unfortunate consequence of economics that oil companies are a high margin, high volume, low margin business. So when the cost of the commodity goes up, the profit margin also goes up, but it's a short-lived thing. And I'm certainly not defending profit margins for oil companies, especially when it comes at the expense of the people that I represent. But I'm very glad that we have oil companies, because without them, life would get a lot more expensive. So, or we'd be reliant on foreign energy coming in. So I'm very thankful that we have those energy companies, and I want them to be healthy. I don't want them to make an excess profit, but I don't want them to lose money either, because if they lose money, then tomorrow or the next year, we're not going to have them anymore. So that's the economic situation with them. Your question about gas tax is an excellent one. When I was in the state legislature, I was one of the leaders in the opposition to the gas tax increase. And the reason why I was so fervently opposed to it is not the fact that I don't think we should be collecting money from the sale of gasoline to fund our highway system, because I do believe that that's something that's warranted. The problem is that the majority of the money that we collect is funneled off into other purposes and actually never makes it to road repair and maintenance. And by other purposes, I'm talking about things like mass transit. And a lot of people say, well, that's transportation related. And to be clear, I'm a fan of mass transit. When I was in local government, I served on the board of directors of a local transit authority, so I know a lot about mass transit. I'm just saying that it's disingenuous to say that we have to raise the gas tax because we don't have enough money to maintain our roads, when so much of that revenue goes into things that have nothing to do with road maintenance. I just don't think that that's fair to charge California motorists for. Many people have been urging the governor to implement a moratorium on the gas tax increase. I mean, a moratorium on the whole gas tax would be nice, but the gas tax increase, there's another one that's phased in. The gas tax that was passed several years ago that I led the opposition to has been phased in over several years. So it got increased last August. It will go up again this August. And many people are pushing the governor to delay that increase, which he has the power to do. It was built into the legislation. He's been resistant to that. I don't know why. Instead, he gave the State of the Union address, inexplicably not before the legislature last night, but in an empty room. But I don't know why he did that. But he did talk about the gas tax, and he said that rather than doing a moratorium, he'd like to do some kind of rebate program. And that really made me cringe, because every time the state tries to pick winners and losers in rebating tax money, it ends up badly for consumers. And so I'm not very optimistic about that. I wish that he would simply use the billions of dollars of state revenue surplus that we have right now to avoid having to raise gas taxes on California consumers. I think that's pretty simple. And it's something I know a lot about. As most of you know, I was the vice chair of the budget committee in the legislature for 5 years. So I know a lot about state revenue. We've got about a $50 billion surplus right now. It would be easy to use that revenue to avoid having to tax gasoline further. But that was a great question. All right, I think we've got time for one or maybe two more. So Sally from Yucaipa. Sally, what can I answer for you?
Well, I'm 85 years old. My husband and I both have cancer, and we have to drive to a City of Hope for our treatments. And with this gas problem, we just don't know exactly what's going to happen. And for my second question is, these tech companies seem to be just running wild. There's no control over them. And I think that's going to be a downfall of our country. So maybe you could help me with that.
Yes, excellent points on the gas, the price of fuel. Yours is one of many stories from constituents that I've heard every time I have a meeting with constituents. It comes up. Gas has gone up, is over 50% higher today than it was a year ago, just to illustrate the size of the problem. So it's something that I am acutely aware of, and that's why I am so passionate about getting us back to a place of American energy independence. And your question about big tech is very timely. It's something that I'm deeply involved in. Just because of my tech background, I think a lot of my colleagues look to me to take a leadership role in this, and it's something that I'm working on. I've been assigned to a tech task force, and we are creating some rules and regulations to try and put some common sense boundaries over the things that the control that big tech has over our lives. One thing that I'm particularly concerned about is data privacy. I think that we all have a right to control what tech companies collect about us and what they do with that data. It's something that I was deeply involved in California. We have in California the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. I was closely involved with the crafting of that, and we are putting together legislation to try and federalize that, to bring those, to enhance those protections and bring them to out to the rest of America. And I'm also very concerned about the ways that big tech can utilize the information it collects to create unfair barrier to competition that really prevents smaller companies from competing with them. Although I believe in fair markets, I also believe that federal government has an obligation to make sure that free markets continue to function by policing attempts to monopolize markets. So those are both pieces of legislation that we're working on actively and I'm deeply involved in. But thank you for very much for the question. So last question here, and then we'll wrap it up. Jalen from Ukaipa. Jalen, what can I answer for you?
Hi. Okay, so I have a couple questions. My first one is about the Omnibus bill. I actually used to work for Congress for several years. And so I know that for some people, it may feel like the Omnibus bill just popped out of nowhere, but I know they've been talking about this for the past week and a half, and they've been releasing drafts, and they've been negotiating this. And so I'm wondering why you are voting no on this just on principle. Why weren't you and your staff reading the draft, and why, when this came out this morning, haven't all your staff just sat down and, plowed through it all, just separated out between you and your staff and your interns and just plowed through it all and then decided to vote? Obviously, you voted yes on the past couple, and so they all haven't been like this. I know that everyone's staying late tonight, but I know that, all Congress is doing that just to make sure, the government isn't shut down. So I think voting no on principle is kind of pointless, and dragging this out is pointless. So I'm wondering why you didn't just decide to plow through it and read the draft beforehand.
No, that's totally a fair question. So to be clear, I'm not voting no on principle. I'm voting no for two reasons. First of all, I can't look my constituents in the eye and tell them that I understand what's in that bill when it's 3,000 pages long and it was dropped at 1:30 a.m. this morning. And to answer your other question, no, there have not been drafts. There have been circulated some memos about what may or may not be in the omnibus. But you can't take that as gospel. You have to actually go back and compare that against the actual legislation that gets put in print, because, as you know, quite often the reality is different than what was discussed. But the bigger reason for a no vote is my concern about the overall level of federal spending. And although you are correct that I voted yes on the continuing resolutions, they merely continued the existing level of federal spending. The omnibus that we're voting on tonight substantially increases federal spending. And I think that that's irresponsible in an era when we're already running a almost 30% budget deficit. And that's in a normal year. I mean, the budget deficit lately has been over 50%. To give you an idea of what that does, in addition to my concerns about inflation, I have an overall concern about the national debt, which in the last couple of months has passed $30 trillion for the first time in the history of our country. And to put that in context, that's over $90,000 for every single American. I had the Congressional Budget Office personnel in my office here in D.C. yesterday, and we had a long meeting talking about my concerns about this issue. And what I wanted to talk with them about is that they recently issued a report that they give a 30-year forecast on what's going to happen. And even under a very optimistic economic scenario, they report that by 2050, we're going to have a national debt that's over twice as big as the entire size of our economy. And at that point, it will take over half of our federal tax revenue just to do debt service on the national debt. I mean, so obviously that's untenable. We can't spend over half of all the money we collect just paying interest. So sometime between now and 30 years from now, we're going to get to a crisis point and we're going to have to fix this problem. And so I think it's unconscionable to allow federal spending to continue to increase without coming up with a plan of how to balance this budget and get the problem under control. And by the way, reduce the inflation that's causing so much economic pain for the people that I represent. So, that's the reason for the no vote on the omnibus. But totally fair question. And I appreciate you bringing it up. Well, I see that not only we're out of time, but I see that we have had a vote called on the omnibus. So I have to go vote. But I want to thank you so much for taking part in our telephone town halls. These are really valuable for me. Not only does it let me share what's going on in DC, but allows me to hear directly from you the things that are impacting our community and the concerns that you have. And so it's really valuable. And I apologize. I see we still have a few questions in the queue. We never get to all of them, but if you stay on the line after we close the town hall here, you will be able to leave a message for me, and I will get back to each and every person that had a question and answer them. Get you an answer to that question. So please, if there's a question that you want to address that I didn't answer, please stay on the line here in just a minute as we conclude the town hall, and leave me a message, and we'll make sure we get your question answered. So I want to thank you very much for sharing part of your evening with me. I want to encourage you again, if you press *6, you can sign up for our newsletter and keep up to date with what I'm doing on your behalf in Washington, D.C. But in the meantime, I want to thank you very much for not only talking to me this evening, but allowing me to represent you in Washington. It is an honor to be your voice in Washington, D.C. Good night, everyone.